Good morning. My name is Jerry Smith, and I served as SACRAO president during the 98-99 year, presiding over the meeting that was held in Savannah, Georgia, at the Hyatt Regency. I'm not one to have diplomas hanging on the walls. I've got 3 degrees, and I'm proud of them, but I don't have a single diploma hanging on the wall. Not that there's anything wrong with those people who do that, but what I do have hanging on my wall is a good number of SACRAO plaques. I suppose one might conclude that SACRAO is more precious to me than my formal degrees, and if they did that, they probably would be right. SACRAO has truly been a wonderful organization for me. I've profited, I've grown from the organization. Let me tell you a little bit about my year. I had planned to have a nice little caretaker administrative year. That's what I thought I was going to have. Didn't think a lot was going to happen in that year. Boy, was I wrong. I had not even become president yet. I was a few moments away from being handed the gavel at our Corpus Christi meeting when my good friend and former SACRAO president, Mark Strickland, moved during the business meeting that SACRAO take a position relative to the situation that had occurred with ACRAO. ACRAO had well, during the town meeting at SACRAO, some revelations were made public to the membership about the financial health of ACRAO, also about some management decisions made by ACRAO. Well, the motion that Mark presented was passed unanimously at the business meeting by the membership, and the SACRAO Executive Committee worked well into the night, the following night, I suppose it was, drafting and redrafting a letter that was sent under my signature, but from the Executive Committee. The letter was sent to the ACRAO Board of Directors, the national office staff, and also to every state and regional president of the organizations throughout the country. It was a tough time. I would not presume to say that anything that SACRAO did precipitated change, but within a couple of months after that letter, there had been a change at the national leadership level at ACRAO, and basically a turnaround of, I think, attitude and philosophy by the ACRAO board. And by the end of my presidential year, ACRAO seemed very well poised for financial recovery and good open communication, things that had probably not occurred in the 2 or 3 years prior to the situation. I guess the first event that I would reference after becoming president would be the Mostest 1998 at Raleigh, North Carolina. That conference really was outstanding. Martha Welch and Tom Black worked as co-chairs, Tom in charge of the program, Martha in charge of local arrangements, and Mostest 98 was a fine event. It was clouded, I suppose, by the events just prior to and then more dramatically after that. Mostest 99 had been sort of snake bitten from day one, I guess. A decision had been made by the SACRAO Executive Committee, to go to Fayetteville, Springdale, Arkansas for Mostest 1999. Fred Russell, who was an old friend of mine matter of fact, Fred served as a member at large, I believe it was, or maybe a vice president for SACRAO during the late 1980s. At that time, Fred was at East Texas State University, now Texas A&M Commerce. But Fred had moved on to the University of Arkansas, had a senior position there. He was a known quantity by all of us, and we agreed to go to Fayetteville, Springdale for the Mostest 1999 year. Well, Fred developed leukemia, and shortly thereafter passed away. As a matter of fact, it was just right before, a few months before the Corpus Christi meeting. Fred was our known quantity, and we felt like we had all of our eggs in one basket with Mostest 99. So Paul Taylor, who was president before me, and I made a collective decision to back off the Arkansas bid for Mostest. The contract had not yet been signed, at that time, at the time of Fred's death. So Arkansas flipped back a year in their posture to hold Mostest in 2000. That happened because there was a last-minute step forward, a bid, if you will, from Debbie Carver, who was at Daytona Beach Community College. Debbie had been an LAC chair for a SACRAO event a couple of years early in Ponte Vedra, Florida, did an excellent job. So Debbie was the known quantity. Paul and I decided we needed to go to Daytona for 1999. The contract negotiations were well underway just prior to Mostest 98 in Raleigh. We hadn't actually signed the contract, but we're just fine-tuning one or two minor points. About that time, as luck would have it, Debbie Carver was offered one of those lifetime career opportunities, something you just can't say no to. She was offered an opportunity to go into sales with PeopleSoft. So Debbie left Daytona Beach Community College just prior to the Raleigh Mostest. Susan McLaughlin, who had worked for Debbie, was elevated to Debbie's former position or something very similar to, and Susan said that she would be happy to run the Mostest Conference for us. So we went ahead, and just a week or two, maybe even the week after the Mostest 98 Raleigh, we signed the contract for Mostest 99 going to an Adams Mark in Daytona Beach. Well, everything sounded great, but it didn't stay great for too long. About 2 weeks later, Susan McLaughlin phoned me and told me that she just could not run the Mostest 99. I'd actually already signed the contract at that time as a SACRAO president, but Susan said she couldn't do it. She was also serving as president of SACRAO. She was taking on a new job. She really, well, she didn't sound well, and how well that came to hit me in the face. Because about 48 hours later, I received a phone call that Susan McLaughlin had taken her own life. It was a tough time. It was a tough time for me personally. It was a tough time for SACRAO. We agonized for a couple of weeks whether we could actually cancel the Mostest 99. We'd already signed the contract, and the Adams Mark was not too anxious to accommodate us in that regard. Susan's death left a tremendous void. I represented SACRAO at Susan's funeral in Statesboro, Georgia, on a very, very dark Saturday morning. It was a dark day for SACRAO. It was a dark day for Susan's many, many friends. But after a lot of soul searching, Joe Ruth, who was at Seminole Community College at the time, Joe offered, with some reluctance, but Joe offered to go ahead and run the Mostest Conference. He was assisted by Christy Presswood, who was on the Daytona Beach Community College staff, and also Shelby Stanfield from the University of Texas at Austin. Susan's death had actually brought a new way of looking at the program. Prior to that time, the program had pretty much been done by the local group, wherever Mostest was hosted. But because of the tragedy of Susan's death, everything happening as it did, Shelby, who had a major role in a program, Mostest program 2 years earlier, when Mostest was in Austin, Shelby agreed to run a program committee, and a lot of different people pitched in there, and actually started a structure by the crisis, by the tragedy, started a structure that may be with us for years to come, where the Mostest program will be done somewhat like the SACRAO program. It will not be a one person or one area or one state show, but it will be pretty much spread throughout the SACRAO region. We're hoping that's going to work. Okay, now on some happy notes. I was probably, well, I know up to that point in time, I was able to attend more state meetings than any other SACRAO president. I enjoyed participation in meetings in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Florida, and Virginia. I even had one last opportunity to wear my mint green polyester leisure suit I had borrowed from the drama department's costume vault. I'd worn that a couple of years earlier, our 50th anniversary, and I was able to wear that in Tennessee, I believe it was, where their social hour there was dressed in a funky decade. So I did. The social activities were fantastic in those states. I danced on the beach at Alabama. I visited a casino in Mississippi, of course lost money there. Wore a grass skirt and did the hula at Georgia with Jekyll Island. Had a wonderful open air cookout in Oklahoma. Had a wonderful activity at a Air Naval Museum in Pensacola, Florida, and was even ice skating in Charlottesville, Virginia. That was, I spent more time falling than I did skating, I think. But it was a great period. It was a great time for me professionally. I gave a little bit to each of those staff meetings, but I'm sure I walked away with much more than I gave. It was just a wonderful professional development opportunity. At the end of my administrative year, just as the month or two was winding down prior to the meeting in Savannah, lots of things started happening with me. Jacksonville State University had supported me and SACRAO like you would not believe. They supported me through the late 80s when I was a member at large, throughout most all of the 1990s. They were a great supporting institution to SACRAO, and my love was Jacksonville State University. It's where I'd been. I was a student. I'd spent my whole professional career there. But just a couple months before the meeting, I was presented with an opportunity to accept a position as Associate Vice President for Student Enrollment Services at the University of Texas at Arlington. It was a very difficult decision, but the early retirement formula in Alabama, where I had actually had about 25, 26 years, I could make almost as much money from Alabama not working as I could working. So I accepted the call, and I made a decision to accept an appointment at UTA. Actually, I was employed by both institutions at the time of the SACRAO meeting. I didn't officially start with UTA until March the 1st, but I was on board as a consultant with UTA at that time, and it was, how many presidents are employed with both institutions at the same time? What can I say? Well, I was, at the time of the meeting, a lot of things were going on. I was dealing with some personal issues. I found out just about 3 weeks before the meeting I had to have knee surgery, of all things. So my life was in total transition during the meeting. I was hobbling around with one good leg and one bad leg, danced on a stool. I wouldn't suggest that. That was a little awkward. But the meeting, I guess I was just in a fog. So many things were happening. The excitement of the meeting, where I was fortunate enough to be serving as president, transitioning to Texas. I actually left the Savannah after our executive committee meeting on Thursday, came back to Alabama, closed on my house that night, the very night that I returned from Savannah. The next day, on Friday, Jacksonville State gave me a retirement reception, a going away reception, if you will. Then that weekend I was packing, and Monday I was headed to Texas with 10,000 pounds of my life in tow. It was a very strained time. It was exciting, but it was strained, and as I look back on it now, it's almost like a fog, those few days. I had such wonderful support from so many professional friends. I'm going to reference a few, and there's danger in that, because I'll probably leave somebody out, and then I'll realize that, gosh, why didn't you include this person or that person? But I've got to mention a few people. First of all, Paul Taylor, who was immediate past president during my presidential year. Paul and I were dear friends, and we really became pretty much like brothers. I don't know how to say it, how to express it more than when I was recognizing him at the Savannah meeting. We were over there hugging. I mean, two guys hugging and embracing, and the friendship will go on for a long time. The Georgia gang did an outstanding job with the meeting. Marsha Welch served as local arrangements chair, and Melanie Morandi and Carol Nobles were major contributors to the success of the meeting. Carol Carol, by the way, Carol at the University of Georgia at the time, and not too many months after I got to UTA, I was able to bring Carol on board as the Director of Admissions here. She's doing a great job at UTA. I'm not real popular in Georgia right now, I know that, but taking her away, but I hope Carol will be with us for a long time. I was fortunate in that meeting, in the Savannah business meeting, to be able to present the Distinguished Service Award to my good friend and now fellow Texan Dave Stones. I also presented a certificate of appreciation posthumously to the parents of Susan McLaughlin. And one note that happened at the outset of that meeting that never will forget, our opening session was on Valentine's Day, and Jim Davis, who had been a longtime acquaintance going back 20 years, Jim, to the surprise of virtually everyone in the opening Sunday night session, at the end of the meeting, I recognized Jim to come up to the podium, and Jim proposed marriage in a poem to Janet Buskis, who had been on the executive committee for some time. So it really started off with a bang, and it was a wonderful event. The individuals followed me. Chuck Morgan followed me as president, did an outstanding job, and then Lisa Harris, who will be following Chuck. Both very, very good friends. Enjoyed working with them in my past president's year tremendously. Chuck did such a wonderful job. A couple of the dear friends, just got to mention Michelle Forbes, her friendship. She was newsletter editor for a 3-year period. I had been newsletter editor just before going on the president-elect president cycle. So Michelle and I became dear friends, and I've got to mention my dear friend Sally Markello, who was just a tremendous value. Sally was a treasurer, well, member at large 1 year and then treasurer, and I thank Sally for her dear friendship. And to my staff at Jacksonville State University, who were so supportive of me and SACRAO. I had two of the best secretaries a person could ever want. Susan Bars and Pam Torello were my secretaries throughout the 90s, and they truly were SACRAO secretaries. SACRAO owes these two ladies a great deal. Okay, enough of that, and I probably should have mentioned somebody. I didn't. I apologize. SACRAO's been a wonderful ride for me. I've been on the leadership team for SACRAO. I actually served as a member at large 1 year late in the 1980s, and I was on the executive committee for almost all of the 1990s, and rolled off as immediate past president in February 2000. So I actually was fortunate enough to serve in parts of 3 decades and 2 centuries. So, you know, that's a pretty noteworthy accomplishment, and I'm proud of that. And I will. It's time for me to step aside and let some young folks come along. I dearly love SACRAO, and I thank you, the membership of SACRAO, for allowing me to serve the most wonderful professional organization ever. Thank you.